What if the greatest love story isn't about two hearts finding each other, but about fulfilling the final wish of someone who loved you first? This is the moving journey of Tuan, Diem and Toan's grandmother, a woman silently battling a terminal illness, hiding her pain to protect her family. When the truth is revealed, Tuan and Diem take her to hospitals, clinging to hope, only to face the inevitable. Her last desire is simple, yet profound: to witness their wedding. Stay with us, subscribe now, and let this emotional story touch your heart. In the quiet rhythm of daily life, few people notice the silent struggle carried within the frail body of Tuan's grandmother. She had recently learned of her illness, an unrelenting disease that gnawed at her strength day by day. Yet she chose to hide the truth from the family she so deeply loved. Tuan and the others still saw her as the same gentle, warm figure, her hands busily preparing meals, her eyes soft with affection, her voice tender as she reminded them to eat more rice or wear warmer clothes on cooler evenings. The truth, however, rested like a stone in her chest, heavy and unmovable. It was not the disease itself that pained her most, but the thought of watching her children and grandchildren sink into sorrow. She had always been a shield for them, never a burden. And so, with the quiet dignity that defined her life, she bore the weight alone. She smiled through her weariness, her lips curving upward even when her body begged her to rest. When others laughed around the dinner table, she laughed too, not wanting them to glimpse the shadows lurking behind her eyes. But in the silence of the night, when the house fell asleep, she sometimes pressed her hand against her chest, whispering a prayer not for her own recovery, but for her family's happiness. She wished, above all, to preserve the peace of their lives, even if it meant silencing her own pain. There was only one person to whom she entrusted her secret: Diem. In Diem, she had found a quiet listener, a young woman whose heart brimmed with kindness and whose presence felt like sunlight streaming gently through an open window. She called Diem to sit beside her in the small garden where the roses bloomed, their fragrance mingling with the cool evening air. There, with trembling hands folded in her lap, she revealed what she had hidden from everyone else. Her voice was steady at first, but it faltered as she spoke of the doctors, of the diagnosis that had stolen away the hopes she once clung to. Diem sat frozen, her throat tightening, her eyes glistening as she fought to keep her tears from falling. She had always admired the grandmother's resilience, the way she carried herself with grace no matter how harsh life became. To hear of her suffering now was like watching a pillar of strength slowly crumble, and Diem's heart ached with helplessness. She wanted to scream, to call Tuan immediately and demand that he take his grandmother to the best hospital, but she could see the pleading look in the older woman's eyes, a look that asked for silence, for trust. "Don't tell Tuan yet," the grandmother whispered, reaching for Diem's hand. "He worries too much. I want him to live each day in peace, not in fear of losing me." Diem could not reply. She only squeezed the wrinkled hand in hers, feeling the fragility of life pulsing through those thin veins. In that moment, her affection for the grandmother deepened into something fierce, almost protective. She silently vowed she would do everything she could to stand by this woman, to lighten the burden she carried alone. As the evening stretched on, the two of them remained in the garden, the air filled with the quiet fragrance of roses and unspoken words. Diem's heart was heavy, yet she forced a small smile, hoping to mirror the strength of the woman beside her. Beneath the star-scattered sky, one truth became painfully clear. Love sometimes means carrying grief in silence, and sacrifice often wears the face of a gentle grandmother who would rather suffer alone than cast shadows on those she loves most. Days passed, and although Diem honored her promise to keep the grandmother's secret, the weight of it pressed heavily on her heart. She could no longer look at Tuan without feeling the sharp sting of guilt, for she knew a truth that he, in his innocence, did not. Yet silence could not last forever. One evening, when the worry in her chest became unbearable, Diem gently urged the grandmother to allow her to share the truth with Tuan. At first, the old woman resisted, her eyes filled with quiet defiance, but eventually, she saw the determination etched on Diem's face. With a weary sigh, she nodded. "If he knows," she said softly, "promise me he won't drown himself in despair." When Diem finally told him, Tuan felt as if the earth had shifted beneath his feet. He sat motionless, his jaw clenched, his breath shallow, unable to believe that the grandmother who had raised him with endless love was suffering in silence. Anguish burned in his chest, but alongside it came resolve. He grasped Diem's hand, his voice thick with emotion. "We will not give up. We will take her to every hospital, every specialist. There must be someone who can help." And so began their desperate journey. The very next morning, Tuan and Diem accompanied the grandmother to a renowned hospital in the city. The corridors smelled faintly of antiseptic. The walls gleamed white under the harsh fluorescent lights, and everywhere they turned, they saw faces lined with worry, waiting for answers. Tuan walked beside his grandmother, steadying her steps, while Diem carried her bag, her eyes darting anxiously as though she could somehow shield the old woman from bad news. They clung to hope, fragile as it was, whispering silent prayers as they waited outside the doctor's office. The consultation felt endless. The doctor's words came slowly, carefully chosen, yet heavy as stones. The diagnosis was confirmed. The disease had already advanced beyond cure. Medicine could only slow the decline, not reverse it. When the words finally sunk in, Tuan's heart broke anew. He looked at the grandmother, who sat with serene acceptance, and for the first time, he realized the depth of her courage. While he struggled to hold back tears, she reached over and patted his hand, as if he were the one who needed comfort. Unwilling to accept defeat, Tuan insisted on traveling further. They visited another hospital, then another. Specialists renowned for their skill, clinics rumored to have cured the incurable. Each time, they carried with them the same fragile hope, and each time it was gently crushed beneath the weight of truth. No matter how advanced the technology, no matter how compassionate the doctors, the outcome remained unchanged. The illness was merciless, unyielding, a shadow that could not be lifted. For Diem, the journey was both heartbreaking and enlightening. She saw how much love bound this family together. Tuan's unwavering determination, the grandmother's quiet strength, and the unspoken tenderness that flowed between them in every shared glance, every clasped hand. At night, when they returned home exhausted, Diem would watch Tuan sit by his grandmother's side, massaging her hands as if his touch alone could chase away the pain. She longed to ease his sorrow, but sometimes all she could do was sit beside them,
her presence a silent promise that neither of them would face this darkness alone. Though the hospitals had offered no miracles, the journey revealed something precious: the depth of love and resilience in the face of despair. Tuan, though wounded by disappointment, refused to surrender completely. He told himself that as long as his grandmother was still with him, every moment was a gift to be cherished. And Diem, standing quietly beside him, knew that this storm, no matter how devastating, was drawing them closer together.
One quiet afternoon, when the sun spilled its golden light across the veranda, the grandmother gathered Toan and Diem close. Her face was pale, yet her eyes carried a glow that seemed to transcend the weariness of her body. She reached out with trembling hands, one resting gently on Toan's, the other on Diem's, and spoke in a voice that wavered like a candle flame in the wind. "My children," she began, "I have little strength left, and time is no longer my companion. But there is one wish, one final wish that lingers in my heart. Before I leave this world, I long to see the two of you married, bound together in love before heaven and earth." The words pierced the silence like a sacred vow, leaving Toan and Diem breathless. Toan's chest tightened, his throat burning as though he had swallowed fire. He looked into his grandmother's eyes, eyes that had guided him since childhood, eyes that had always been full of patience, love, and wisdom. To see them now, shimmering with both fragility and longing, tore him apart. "Grandmother," he whispered, his voice breaking, "you will live to see us wed, I promise. We will make it happen." His hand tightened around hers as though by sheer force he could keep her tethered to life. Diem, sitting quietly at her side, felt tears roll down her cheeks. She had always loved the grandmother deeply, but in that moment, her love deepened into reverence. She saw not just an elder speaking her final wish, but a woman whose entire life had been defined by sacrifice and love for her family. Diem took her hand, pressing it to her lips as though sealing a vow. "I promise you, Grandma, we will not let your dream go unfulfilled." From that day onward, the air in the house changed. What had once been filled with unspoken sorrow was now charged with determination. Toan and Diem began planning a wedding, not grand or extravagant, but heartfelt and swift, an act of love meant to honor the woman who had given them so much. The thought of seeing her smile, radiant even in her frailty, became their guiding star. At night, as they pored over details, choosing flowers, arranging for close relatives together, Toan would sometimes pause, overwhelmed with the bittersweet weight of it all. He wanted to marry Diem out of love, yes, but also out of urgency, so that his grandmother's heart might rest in peace. The paradox stung him. Love and grief intertwined, joy and sorrow bound together like inseparable threads. Meanwhile, the grandmother watched them quietly, her heart swelling with pride. Though her body weakened, her spirit soared as she saw their devotion not just to each other, but to her. Often she would sit by the window, gazing at the sky with a serene smile, whispering prayers of gratitude. She felt her life had come full circle, from raising her grandson with tender hands to now witnessing him stand tall, ready to build a life of his own with the woman he loved. On evenings when pain gripped her chest, she still refused to let despair show. Instead, she would call Diem to sit beside her and gently caress her hand. "Take care of him," she would whisper, glancing at Toan, who pretended not to hear as he busied himself with tea. "He may look strong, but his heart is softer than you know." Diem would nod through her tears, silently vowing again that she would keep her promise.
And so, while the shadow of illness loomed, the grandmother's final wish became the family's light. Though time was slipping away, it was filled with meaning, with hope, with preparations for a day that would not only celebrate love, but also honor the woman who had shaped their lives with her unwavering devotion. For Toan and Diem, the path ahead was no longer simply about surviving the sorrow of impending loss. It was about creating a moment so pure, so radiant, that even death could not
Hello,
diminish its
xin chào tất
beauty.
cả các khán giả của kênh Lý Tử Diễn Review. Vậy là trong tập phim ngày hôm nay thì bà của Toàn nghèo nhưng bà đã giấu kín và không nói cho ai. Đến tận ngày hôm nay sau khi lên thành phố thì bà rất quý Diễm và đã tâm sự với Diễm biết về tình hình căn bệnh của bà. Diễm đã trò chuyện với Toàn và hai người quyết định sẽ đưa bà đi bệnh viện lớn nhất để kiểm tra lại kết quả xem có chính xác hay là có sự nhầm lẫn nào ở đây hay không. Rất mong là bà sẽ gặp sự hóa lành. Liệu rằng kết quả có sự thay đổi hay không, tất cả sẽ được hé lộ vào tập sau. Các bạn nhớ bấm nút đăng ký kênh để nhận được thông báo mới nhất về tập phim sẽ được phát sóng trên kênh nha. Cảm ơn các bạn rất nhiều. Đừng quên hãy bấm nút like, chia sẻ và để lại bình luận dưới video nha. Bye bye.